When you think about human evolution, you probably picture a nice, clean line. A stooped-over ape gradually stands upright, loses its fur, picks up a spear, and poof, it's us, staring into a smartphone. But the fossil record tells a story that's so much messier. And nowhere is that messier, or more fascinating, than in Africa, around 300,000 years ago. We often call it the cradle of humankind, but it was less a cradle and more of a crowded, continent-sized high school cafeteria. See, we have this lingering idea that we, Homo sapiens, were the inevitable brilliant conclusion to a long, drawn-out experiment. But for a huge chunk of our own species' existence, we weren't alone. In fact, if you were a sapiens wandering around the savannah back then, you were the new kids on the block. And the neighborhood? Well, it already had some very established, very different residents. Let's set the stage. The Middle Pleistocene. It's a time of dramatic climate shifts, and Africa is a patchwork of forests, grasslands, and deserts. And walking through this landscape are at least 4 distinct types of humans. Not distant cousins from millions of years prior, but contemporaries, walking the same ground, drinking from the same rivers, and almost certainly staring at each other from across the tall grass. First, you've got us, Homo sapiens, anatomically modern humans. We're just showing up in the fossil record, with our characteristically high foreheads, small faces, and a brand new toolkit. We're adaptable, we're clever, but at this point, we are not the dominant global power. We're just one startup in a very competitive market, trying to find our niche. Then, you've got the heavyweights. You might know them as Homo heidelbergensis, or, as some researchers prefer for the African variant, Homo rhodesiensis. These folks were built. They were robust, big-brained hunters who had been running the show for hundreds of thousands of years before we even existed. They were the established veterans, the apex predators, and frankly, you probably wouldn't want to pick a fight with one. And then there's the ghost. If sapiens were the newcomers, and heidelbergensis were the old guard, our third cohabitant was something else entirely. Something seemingly ancient, yet hauntingly familiar. I'm talking about Homo naledi. Discovered deep within the rising star cave system in South Africa, these fossils dropped a bombshell on paleoanthropology. Here's why naledi is so baffling. They had tiny brains about the size of an orange. Their shoulders and curved fingers were perfect for climbing trees, like an ape-like ancestor from millions of years prior. But, and this is a huge but, their wrists, hands, and especially their feet were shockingly modern. They looked like they were built to walk long distances, just like us. It's a mosaic of traits that frankly shouldn't exist. For years, scientists assumed naledi must have been an ancient experiment, a dead-end branch from 2 or 3 million years ago. Then the dating results came in. The bones weren't millions of years old. They were, wait for it, between 335,000 and 236,000 years old. This wasn't an ancestor. This was a contemporary. A small-brained, tree-climbing ghost human was living in the same neighborhood at the exact same time as big-brained sapiens and heidelbergensis. So let's just pause and get the full picture. It's 300,000 BCE. You've got the heidelbergensis hunters, with brains nearly as big as ours, masters of their territory. You've got the brand new sapiens, us, with our chins and our fancy new tools, just starting to figure things out. And you've got Homo naledi, a small-bodied, small-brained enigma that seems to have stepped right out of the distant past. This completely shatters the linear evolution idea. It's not a ladder, it's a bush. A dense, thorny, chaotic bush. And these different branches weren't just coexisting politely in different climate zones. Their ranges had to overlap. A sapiens hunting party could have crested a hill and looked down into a valley where a group of naledi were foraging, while a heidelbergensis group stalked buffalo just a few miles away. This immediately raises the big question, how? How did so many different kinds of humans, all needing protein and calories and water, manage to live in the same place at the same time? Did they ignore each other? Did they fight? Did they interbreed? The fossil record is pretty quiet on specifics, but we can make some very strong inferences based on a simple biological principle: niche partitioning. In ecology, niche partitioning is basically an agreement to disagree. It's a way for similar species to avoid direct competition by specializing in different things. Think of 2 modern predators, a cheetah and a leopard. They're both big cats, but the cheetah hunts by day using pure speed, while the leopard hunts by night using stealth and power. They share the same space, but they aren't applying for the exact same job. It's almost certain this is how our human cousins carved up the African continent. Let's start with the heavyweights, Homo heidelbergensis or rhodesiensis. These were not subtle creatures. Their skeletons were massive, and their toolkit, known as the acoulion, was all about one thing: power. They made big, heavy-duty hand axes designed for processing large carcasses. These guys were the specialized big-game hunters. They were taking down giant buffalo, hippos, maybe even young elephants. It was a high-risk, high-reward lifestyle. They were built for it, and it was their niche. They were the apex predators of the open savanna, and had been for hundreds of thousands of years. They were the incumbents, the old guard. And then there was us, Homo sapiens. We were the scrappy generalists. Our early toolkit was lighter, more varied. We had smaller, sharper points that could be thrown as spears, not just jabbed. This meant we could hunt smaller, faster prey. But more importantly, we weren't just hunting. We were fishing, trapping, gathering plants, and exploiting coastal resources like shellfish. We were the jack of all trades, able to pivot our food source when one thing ran dry. We didn't need to fight a heidelbergensis for a hippo. We could just go catch a bunch of catfish instead. Okay, so heidelbergensis took the big game and sapiens took, well, pretty much everything else. So where does Homo naledi fit in? This is where it gets really weird. Remember those tiny brains and climbing adapted shoulders? They were likely specializing in resources that the big-brained humans were ignoring. They were expert foragers, perhaps spending more time in dense woodlands or rocky outcrops, using those climbing skills to access food, be it fruit, honey, or eggs. And that small brain, we see it as a primitive feature, but maybe it was their secret weapon. A brain like ours, or heidelbergensis, is incredibly expensive. It demands a ton of calories, which means you have to hunt or gather constantly. Naledi's smaller brain and slighter body meant they could survive on less. They were the low-energy, high-efficiency model, thriving in the margins, in environments where the bigger-brained humans might starve. But the most mind-blowing clue about Naledi's niche isn't just about food. It's about death. The rising star cave system where they were found isn't just a place where a few bones washed in. We're talking about thousands of fossils, representing at least 15 individuals, from infants to the elderly. And they were found in a chamber, the naledi chamber, that is monstrously difficult to get to, even for modern, skinny cavers. There are no predator bite marks on the bones, no signs they were washed in by a flood. The lead researchers on the project, like Lee Berger, have proposed a radical idea. Homo naledi was intentionally placing its dead in this deep, dark, remote chamber. This is a huge claim. Ritualistic behavior, a burial, in a creature with a brain the size of a grapefruit? It's one of the most intense debates in human origins right now, so just imagine that landscape again. It's not just a physical competition for food. It's a social and cognitive one. You have one species, heidelbergensis, with established hunting traditions. You have another, sapiens, with unmatched adaptability. And you have a third, naledi, that might be navigating complex social rituals of death and burial, all while looking like it stepped out of our deep past. This continent was weird. So we have these 3, possibly 4 human groups all carving out a living, but let's get real. Niche partitioning is a nice, clean ecological term, but life is messy. These groups were not politely sticking to their own designated zones. A sapiens group, desperate after a bad hunt, might absolutely try to scavenge a heidelbergensis kill. A naledi group might get cornered by a sapiens group at a waterhole. Encounters were inevitable, and they were probably tense. This, of course, brings up the other big question. When different human groups meet, they don't just fight or ignore each other. Sometimes they mingle. We know for a fact that when Homo sapiens left Africa, they met and interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans. It's right there in the DNA of most modern non-Africans. So, did this happen inside Africa too? The problem is, finding the evidence is incredibly difficult. Ancient DNA is a fragile, delicate molecule. It hates heat and humidity. Finding preserved DNA in a cold Siberian cave is one thing. But geneticists are clever. If they can't find the source DNA, they can look for its shadow in us, and they found it. By analyzing the genomes of modern African populations, scientists have found chunks of ghost DNA. This is DNA that is clearly human, but it's not from the ancestral sapiens line. It's an echo, an introgression, from a population that is no longer around. This ghosted mixture proves that our sapiens ancestors did interbreed with another, more archaic human population within Africa. Who was it? We don't know. It could have been heidelbergensis. It could have been a late surviving naledi. It could have even been another species we haven't even found fossils for yet. The crowded cafeteria was, it seems, also a place where name tags got swapped. So this interbreeding, it's a tantalizing clue. It means the genetic line's blurred. But here's the stark, unavoidable truth. When you look around the world today, there's only one human species. Us. That crowded cafeteria of the Middle Pleistocene eventually cleared out, leaving only Homo sapiens sitting at the table. This is, without a doubt, the greatest mystery of our own story. Why did we, the new kids, survive, while everyone else vanished? Let's start with the old guard, Homo heidelbergensis rhodesiensis. For hundreds of thousands of years, they were the kings of the African savanna, the undisputed masters of the big game hunt. They had big brains, robust bodies, and a proven toolkit. By all accounts, if you were placing bets 300,000 years ago, you would have put your money on them. And yet, they disappear from the fossil record. It seems that being the apex predator is a fantastic strategy, right up until the moment it isn't. The downfall of the specialist is that they are perfectly adapted to a world that is guaranteed to change. And the Pleistocene was an era of violent climate swings. Ice ages came and went, and in Africa this meant massive, rapid shifts between wet green periods and extreme continent-spanning droughts. This is where the sapiens' jack-of-all-trades strategy proved to be a killer app. When the herds of giant buffalo disappeared because their grasslands dried up, heidelbergensis was in deep, deep trouble. Their whole society was built around that resource. But sapiens? We just shrugged, moved to the coast, and started eating shellfish. Or we moved into the forest and set traps for monkeys. Our greatest weapon wasn't a spear, it was cognitive flexibility. The fate of Homo naledi is even more mysterious. As the low-energy, small-brained specialists, you'd think they would have been fine, surviving in those marginal environments the rest of us ignored. But that small brain, once their greatest asset, might have been their fatal flaw. They were so specialized that when the environment shifted, they simply had no plan B. Their niche, whatever it was, may have simply evaporated. Or, and this is a darker, more chilling possibility, maybe their end was more direct. This leads us to a darker possibility. We often frame the extinction of other humans as a passive event, as if they just faded away. Because the climate changed and they couldn't keep up. But Homo sapiens is, and has always been, an apex predator. More than that, we are an incredibly effective invasive species. When we arrive in a new ecosystem, other large predators tend to struggle because we are so good at monopolizing resources. It's unlikely there were pitched battles or organized wars between species, but there didn't need to be. Our success might have been far more insidious. As the ultimate generalists, we could exploit every food source. We ate the big game heidelbergensis relied on, and we ate the plants and small animals naledi relied on. We were a do-everything competitor that slowly, generation by generation, just took up all the space. We were the ecological equivalent of a tidal wave. And what was our real secret weapon? It probably wasn't just a slightly different toolkit or a more varied diet. It was our brains. Not just the size, but the wiring. We seem to be the only species that ever developed a true reliance on complex, symbolic communication. We could plan, strategize, and most importantly, build vast social networks that extended far beyond our own tiny band. Think about it this way. A group of heidelbergensis might have been brilliant hunters, but their knowledge was locked within their immediate family. A sapiens group, by contrast, was connected to a whole network of other groups, trading information, resources, and genes. If one band invented a better way to make a spear point, that idea could travel. We weren't just a collection of smart individuals, we were a collective superintelligence, 200,000 years ago. And this collective intelligence created technology that gave us a lethal edge. While heidelbergensis was still using heavy, close-quarters thrusting spears, sapiens was perfecting projectile weapons. We were making lighter, sharper points that could be thrown. This is a total game changer. It means you can kill from a safe distance, taking on dangerous prey and dangerous competitors with a fraction of the risk. It's the Pleistocene equivalent of bringing a gun to a knife fight, so it's very likely a combination of all these things. A devastating 1-2-3 punch. First, our flexibility let us survive the climate shifts that hammered the specialist heidelbergensis. Second, our invasiveness meant we vacuumed up all the resources, outcompeting the low-energy naledi. And third, our technology and social networks gave us a lethal advantage in any direct confrontation. We didn't just win the game. We rewrote the rules and then flipped the table over. By around 200,000 years ago, and definitely by 100,000, the crowded continent was looking much emptier. Homo heidelbergensis rhodesiensis was gone. Homo naledi, well, we're not sure when they vanished, but they vanished all the same. The great, messy, diverse experiment in African humanity was over. One branch of the bush had grown so fast and so thick that it starved all the others of sunlight. And with that, Homo sapiens stood alone in its cradle for the first time in its existence. The continent was finally, exclusively, ours. This new solitary status must have changed us. Without other types of humans to compete with, our only real competition was ourselves. And soon, Africa wouldn't be big enough. We were about to look at the horizon and ask, what's over there? The Great Migration out of Africa is often treated as a new chapter, but it's not. It's just the sequel to what we'd already done at home. We had already proven we were the most adaptable, networked, and technologically lethal hominin on the planet. We had outcompeted 3 other human species in the most diverse and challenging environment on Earth. When we left, everything else was just practice. And the rest, as they say, is history. We met the Neanderthals in Europe and the Denisovans in Asia. And just like in Africa, within a few thousand years of our arrival, they were gone too. We were the last human standing. A lonely, globe-spanning, incredibly successful species, all born from that crowded, competitive, and frankly wild high school cafeteria in the heart of Africa.